Hey everyone, so this is going to be my Avengers Endgame review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, leave now. I'm going to be talking about specific things that happened within the movie. Also, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe for future videos. So overall, I will say that this was a fantastic movie. I can't say it's perfect, there were like a few issues here and there, but as a Marvel fan who's been on this journey for about 6 or 7 years now, and for any fan who's been there since the very beginning, this was a satisfying way to end 11 years of storytelling and close a chapter in the universe, while also giving an idea of what the future will look like without going overboard with those teases. I think this movie does a good job with closing Tony and Captain America's journeys. Tony being the one who saves the universe from Thanos was really satisfying, considering that he usually does like selfish acts or acts on impulse, but in this moment it was very selfless and it was a conscious decision that he came to. I was struggling to figure out why Tony was exactly the one to snap his fingers, because honestly anyone could have made that sacrifice. And I guess like the writers wanted Tony to be the one to make that sacrifice, but I think it wouldn't have been as satisfying if Captain America or anyone else did it, because that's what we would have expected. Like, we would have expected Cap to lay his life on the line for the greater good, because he's done it several times. So for Tony to do it, he has put his life on the line several times as well, but for him to do something like this, I think like this really solidifies his character as a hero. It sucks that he died, but it was like a good death. It was one of those deaths where it's like, okay, I'm satisfied that this person died, but I'm not overly mad that they chose to kill this character off. As for his arc throughout the movie, he goes from not wanting to help the Avengers and basically move on from the events of Infinity War. He ends up getting married to Pepper, has a child, and then he feels an ounce of guilt and decides to help the Avengers get everyone back. It goes to show that no matter what, Tony will always look out for others, and he can never be at rest if he knows that he can save others. That's what we've seen again and again with like Ultron and with the Accords. He's just a person who looks out for everybody and tries his best to prevent any other tragedies from happening. And, his guilt will always drive him to do better. As for Captain America, I felt like his character deserved that happy ending when he goes back in time and stays with Peggy. This was like a really perfect way for them to pay off that dance that we've been waiting for so long. His character has been through a lot, and for him to finally get a happy ending, it was really great. Like, I was expecting him to die, but I think him getting a happy ending was a lot better than him dying. His arc was about trying to accept what has happened, but he can't move on because he knows that he has to keep fighting. Faced with incredible odds, he goes through with the plan to save everyone, knowing that it was a risky mission with no guarantee of survival. It's the chance of saving everyone that drives him to go through with his mission. As I said before, I was expecting Captain America to die. He was definitely high on my list of people who were going to die, but I mean, he practically is dead now because he's really old now and he's retired. And Chris Evans isn't coming back either. He's been saying this, we've been hearing about this for so long now, and now we finally know how his character won't come back. I think if they do Secret Wars or they explore the multiverse, we'll definitely see a version of Captain America and Tony again, but more on the multiverse and Secret Wars later. I felt like the original 6 Avengers all had their own moments to shine in this movie. Cap and Tony for sure, Hulk bringing everybody back, risking his own life in doing so, Hawkeye/Ronan being a badass throughout the entire movie, also willing to sacrifice himself for the Soul Stone, Thor trying to do some good, trying to overcome his grief of not being able to kill Thanos, and Black Widow making the sacrifice to acquire the Soul Stone. I think it was more appropriate for her character to make that sacrifice rather than Clint, because she's been a character with a dark past. She's been doing good ever since to make up for her messed up past. She still feels an ounce of guilt for her messed up past, and for her to make the sacrifice to potentially save the universe, it was like the ultimate act of good that essentially erases her past in a way. Like, her past doesn't define her as a hero now, and her being able to do that was the real defining moment for her character throughout the entire MCU. Also, if Clint were to make that sacrifice, it wouldn't have been as great, considering that he lost his family, so the expectation throughout the movie was for him to be reunited with his family. And plus, the emotional payoff wouldn't have been as high because, I don't think a lot of people are big Hawkeye fans as they are Black Widow fans. And I mean, there's not a lot of people that I know that are like super into Black Widow either, but I felt like based on their story arcs throughout the MCU, Black Widow had more story to her character, whereas Clint doesn't really have that much story to his character. The plot of traveling back in time to the past to fix their present problem is a bit of a cliche, but I think how the movie makes this cliche interesting is really good. Now, I am biased here because I love Marvel, so going back and seeing all these old events play out was great with a few twists here and there, but for someone who isn't that big of a Marvel fan or is much more critical of the Marvel movies, I can see how they wouldn't like this format of storytelling and consider it lazy. But the time travel aspect does add a nice effect to the fact that this is 11 years of storytelling wrapping up, so let's take a trip down memory lane and look back to see how far we've come. The third act was amazing. It literally starts off with a bang. When everyone came back, I was so happy. I burst into tears of joy. When Cap finally used Mjolnir, I was screaming and started shouting as if I was watching MMA fight front row. We also got Avengers Assemble for the very first time, although I wish it was more of a battle cry and not a whisper. The score for the entire movie was amazing. My favorite tracks would have to be Portals, The Real Hero, One Shot, Totally Fine, and Main on End. The visual effects were also fantastic as usual. And last, I will say that Japan fight scene was really great. The cinematography, the fact that it was a one shot up until Clint finally killed that Japanese mob boss was fantastic. I kind of wish that the entire moment was a one shot because at the moment where the mob boss was almost he was basically defeated, it cuts to Clint, a close up of Clint stabbing him. I just wish that the scene continued in a one shot where the camera pans up, Clint stabs the mob boss, and then it sort of pulls back and you see Black Widow standing a few feet away from him. But either way, that's just my opinion, but I think what they did was really, really, really great. Now that his family's back, I don't think that we'll be seeing much of Ronin. He may still be Ronin, he'll still take on that persona, but he won't be as ruthless as he was in this movie. So I don't expect him to kill anybody moving forward. But I will have to say that I would love to see a movie as Clint, just killing people for 2 hours straight with the same ambition and cinematography that was in that one shot in Tokyo. So it hurts me to say this, but there are a few issues that I have with this movie. Very few. First being with Thor's trauma and how they address it. It was okay that he experiences grief and, he lets himself go because he didn't kill Thanos. I just didn't like how often the movie would make fun of him. I think they should have dialed back on the humor a little bit and focused more on how he's feeling and how messed up he feels about not being able to kill Thanos. I'm not saying that the movie doesn't address his grief. They do address his grief 2 times. I think once in Asgard, with Rocket, and then the big moment when he talked to his mother, and then again before the first time we saw him, and then the beat or the mood changes from it being all humorous, letting the jokes fly, and then Hulk was oh, we really need you, so it kind of got serious then. But I wish that the movie did a little bit more to address Thor's grief, or at least tone down the humor, so that way people don't walk out of that thinking oh, Thor was kind of played for comic relief a little bit in this movie. It was okay if they made fun of him a little bit, but just not over the top, and that's what I think this movie did a little bit too much of. Thanos appeared to be less interesting and weaker in this movie in terms of his character and storyline. He was basically there to pose as a threat to stop the Avengers from acquiring all the Infinity Stones. And it wasn't even the Thanos that we saw in Infinity War. This was a Thanos from 2014, before Guardians of the Galaxy. So, this was I feel like this portrayal of Thanos was much more two-dimensional. He was just on a conquest to acquire the stones. And I guess it would have been repetitive to go through the whole thing of why he's doing it again, because we already got that in Infinity War. But in the end, it just felt like his character was a lot weaker in this movie compared to Infinity War, where we got a lot of background as to why he's doing what he's doing and he's not doing this because he wants to. Like, it's a burden on him to do this task. It's not like he takes joy in doing this. That's what I got out of Infinity War, but in this movie, it felt like he was more tyrannical and more, just a two-dimensional, like, I'm the bad guy type of villain. It's kind of minor to make this a big issue, but I still, like, am bothered by it a little bit. In Infinity War, Gamora mentions that she found the map to the Soul Stone, and then she ended up burning it, but in this movie, Clint and Nat go to Vormir without that map, so it's a pretty big, like, plot hole in my opinion, but I don't think it's as big as the previous two statements. It's just something that, like, bothers me personally. And time travel is always hard to explain, and it's, like, much harder to wrap my head around, so I'm not really going to address it and whether or not the movie did good on, like, explaining, time travel and if there were any plot holes here and there, but, it's just a mess, and I don't feel like explaining it. As for the future of the MCU, we got a few teases about what to expect moving forward, but nothing major like a post-credit scene with the X-Men or the next big bad for the next 10 years, which I really appreciate. This film was more about ending the past 11 years of Marvel movies, and I felt that was much more important than setting up the next 10 plus years. So Sam is Captain America now, which is something that has happened in the comics fairly recently, actually back in like 2015, I believe. I read an article that said Cap chose Sam as opposed to Bucky because Bucky was broken and damaged, and Sam had like all the characteristics of being quote-unquote Captain America. I would have wanted Bucky to be Captain America, but it does give Sam something to do in the future. Like, it progresses his character, and I think Bucky will just be focusing on himself and trying to become whole again. This may or may not be a reach, but I mean, it's Marvel, so you never know. It's possible that Hawkeye's daughter will become Kate Bishop. In the comics, Kate wasn't Hawkeye's daughter, but I'm sure the MCU will retcon that just to make it simpler. It's unclear what Gamora's status is, whether she was dusted at the end of the movie or if she survived somehow. So I believe that Guardians 3 will be about finding Gamora, whether that's the version we met in this movie or the one who died in Infinity War. But I have a feeling that it might be more about finding the Gamora that we met in this movie, just because if they decide to bring back the Gamora that died in Infinity War, then that will open up the idea of, we can also save Black Widow. And I think I would want Black Widow's death to remain the same. Like, I don't want them to undo her death. As much as I would want to see her again, I just don't think that that would be the right thing to do. Also, speaking of the Guardians, Thor is apparently joining the team. It hasn't been officially confirmed, but I think he'll just be on the team for like Volume 3, and then he'll leave depending on if they want to do more Guardians movies after Volume 3. Chris Hemsworth has said that he is willing to play Thor for as long as possible, so it appears that we will be getting more Thor movies down the line. Before Thor left, he actually gave the throne to Valkyrie, and also Asgard is now on Earth and in Norway, I believe. There was no teaser for the X-Men or Fantastic Four. I wouldn't have expected there to be one because the deal finalized in March and they couldn't even use those characters beforehand. Like, they couldn't let's try to use the X-Men, and then by the time the movie comes out, the deal will be done, so, it cancels out. No, they couldn't touch those characters at all until the deal was finally done. So now the deal is done, they can finally work on integrating the X-Men and Fantastic Four and Deadpool into their universe. But it's going to take some time until we see those characters. I don't remember if they've given an exact timeline, but I think they said something around 5 years. But it's going to be a while. But I think that the snap could be used as a plot device to introduce those characters into our universe. We now have a small detail about what the Loki series is going to be about, or where they're going with the Loki series. The Loki from 2012 during the Battle of New York left with the Space Stone when Tony's mission to acquire the Space Stone failed, and thus he created a new timeline. So the Loki in that series will be the 2012 Loki, exploring that new reality where he probably gets what he wants, which is the throne. This hasn't been confirmed. This is just me speculating based on what we learned in the movie about removing the stones from their timeline and creating alternate universes. So yeah, that's just a speculation. Nothing's been confirmed. Maybe the Loki series has nothing to do with Loki disappearing in 2012 with the Space Stone, but they included it in the movie, so you just have to connect the dots and be like, oh, that's what they're doing with Loki in the TV series. This wasn't mentioned in the film, but in the Far From Home trailer, we will be introduced to the multiverse. As Nick Fury explains it, the snap tore a hole in their reality, so this provides the gateway for alternate versions of characters. We might possibly be introduced to the Spider-Verse, and as well as the next big crossover. This might be set up for the next big crossover, which is, I think, Secret Wars. So overall, I think that this was a really good movie, and as a Marvel fan, I was really satisfied with how it all came together and how it all ended. I'm sad that it's over, but it was a good ending, so I'm not mad or sulking about it. I just can't wait to see what happens next. I'm a little fearful for where they're going to go from here, because they are kind of in a transitional period where, we've gotten used to these past 10 years. Now we have to change things to improve and make things better. And, that could be a good thing. But in most cases, I feel like it's a bad thing depending on what or how they change things within the movies, because, people don't like change. I don't like change. But I just have hope that it will all work out one way or the other. So that's it for this video, but here's my question for you guys. What are your thoughts on Avengers Endgame? Leave them down in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and other than that, my name is Jobi-Wan Kenobi. May the Force be with you, and have a marvelous day from the LA to the DC.